Well, good morning. On the one hand, as the director of the Fair Tax Mark, I'd like to say welcome. On the other hand, I'd like to say to Paul, thanks for inviting me, which is some indication of how far we've come. Because this is not now an idea that was once another of my mad ones, but is something very real indeed. I was also amused this morning that at the local station where I got the train, the staff said to me, "What are you doing today?" I'm wearing a tie. I said, "I'm pretending to be a chartered accountant today." Well, I am a chartered accountant. I'm allowed to be a chartered accountant, but I normally dress as a professor. And in a strange way, I actually embody all the roles of those speaking today. I have been a small business person, a large business person. I have been a senior partner of a firm of accountants. I've been a tax campaigner, and now I'm an academic. And in all those roles, I believe in corporation tax. It has been a persistent part of my life since 1979, when I began to train as an accountant with what is now KPMG. I'm not quite sure that they are as keen on me being one of their alumni as I am of mentioning it, but there we go. And I make no apology for arguing for tax. I wrote a whole book about it. The Joy of Tax, the one that David Cameron said that he took home to try out with Samantha and it doesn't work. Couldn't help but repeat the joke. And why do I think there is a joy in tax? Quite simply because tax is the single most powerful instrument that a government has available to it to change the structure of the society that we live in. That's what I believe the joy of tax is. We can use it to signal the world we want and to build the world we want. But let's be clear, while saying that, I did choose to dress as a chartered accountant for a very deliberate reason this morning, because I want to make clear business is a fundamental part of that world that I think we will want. I believe, and I'm delighted that Rachel said this as well, we're going to live in a mixed economy where the government does play its part and we let public services do what they must do best. But equally, where we encourage business to do what it must do best. And there, as we know from history, some things that government has occasionally tried, which really aren't within its scope. It shouldn't build Austin Allegros. If those who are of that age might remember why. It was the first car I ever drove on the road. Almost enough to put you off driving forever. So let's be realistic. We need a pro-business, pro-tax economy. Those two are reconcilable. 15 years ago, when the tax justice movement began and was pretty much sort of a dream of, well, John Christensen, Prem Sikka and myself, it would have been very hard to have imagined an event like this morning. All the publicity that this is going to get, all the results that we have seen that have come back from the feedback from research by Fair Tax today. It would also, however, have been very hard to have imagined the state of the accounting profession, that it's on the ropes right now, that the world is saying, are these firms fit for purpose? It would have been hard to have imagined country-by-country reporting, which literally came out of the first conversation that John and I ever had, becoming an OECD standard. It would have been hard to imagine that the Institute for Business Ethics can say that tax is the number one concern people raise about business performance. And it would have been hard to imagine that the business world could be in quite such a mess. Carillion is just the tip of an iceberg, which previously was VHS and so on. We have seen failure after failure of the idea that profit maximisation for short-term performance is what business is all about. And we've seen, I'm afraid to say, the failure of the accounting profession to get hold of that and tackle it, and we've seen the failure of their regulator, the Financial Reporting Council, to do anything to address the faults. I went to see the FRC a few years ago, not that long ago, and said to them, what do you think about country-by-country reporting? This idea that civil society is promoting and which the European Parliament and the European Commission want on the public record. And they said, oh, we haven't thought about that. Literally, that's what Wim Bischoff said about country-by-country reporting. He's the chair of the Financial Reporting Council, They set UK accounting standards. We haven't thought about that. Why? Because they haven't thought that anybody but the investor matters. And I'll tell you, that is what is wrong with accounting and business. We have, as a business community, and I'll put myself in that community right now deliberately, not asked the question, what are we for? I will be submitting evidence to the FRC review saying this and saying it's time that business recognise it exists in community. And communities are not just made up of shareholders, they're made up of stakeholders. Let's list those stakeholders. It was done, by the way, in 1975 by accountants who started the process of accounting standard. Why did we know in 1975 that the stakeholders were customers and suppliers and employers and the communities that host businesses? And it was government, including regulators and, of course, tax authorities. And last, I would put it to you, among stakeholders, it's the suppliers of capital, the shareholders. Why do I put them last? Because actually in a quota company, you can break your association with a company if you're a shareholder like that. Oh, and you can acquire it again like that, and come and go whenever you wish. I'll stop clicking my fingers, I know the joke about Bono. Some of you clearly do. So they come and go at will. The rest of us don't. And yet the whole focus of accounting, which has given rise to that whole lobbying industry that Alex talked about, is in the interests of the shareholder. That's got to change. And that's one of the reasons that the Fair Tax Mark is here. We're saying other people have interests. Report to them. The community wants to know, do you pay your tax, fundamentally? You need to be a good supplier. You need to be a good customer. You need to be a good employer. You need to play your part. And you need to recognise that there's a price for you being in the community. I want to mention something which is incredibly important to me, and that is limited liability. Almost every large business in the UK now is a limited liability company. There are almost 5 million limited liability companies in this country now. So that's 1 for every 13 of us, roughly speaking. It was 1 for every 26, by the way, at the turn of the century. It's now 1 for every 13. We're growing businesses faster than we're growing babies in this country at the moment. It's quite an extraordinary fact. Easier to create them as well, by the way. They only cost a few quid. Children, as I have discovered, are very expensive. Limited liability is an abuse of human rights. Imagine that somebody today put forward the idea that we should have limited liability. 2 people, even 1 person in many cases, now sign a piece of paper, and you know what? As a result, they don't have to pay their debts. Clearly, that is an abuse of the rights of the person to whom they owe money. But we've discovered it can work to let people come together to create businesses and the risks that go with it. But there's a price of limited liability. And the price is accountability. You tell the world what you've done with that limited liability, and you account for the benefits it's given to you. Not only not paying your debts, but of course, you came together to employ people. They got there on a road paid for by the state. They got there on a train subsidised by the state, or a bus, maybe not subsidised by the state anymore, unfortunately, but that's something we need to address. We need to make sure they're trained. Who pays for that? They need to make sure they're healthy. Who makes sure they've done that? I spent too long in an NHS hospital with my son this week to ever have doubts about the quality of the NHS. And the employees can even take the risk of working for somebody, which is a massive risk, bigger than any shareholder takes, because the state underpins their risk they might become unemployed. Remember, the shareholder The employee has all their eggs in this one basket. The shareholder normally has spread their risk over a wide portfolio. So the company has to pay for that privilege, in my opinion. Now, I'm not saying that as a result of this, that just because the company is built on all these foundations, there isn't a room for flair and entrepreneurial spirit and risk finance, and luck, because there's a mighty lot of that which goes to make all those other things, by the way. They're all important. But a company is a team. I'm not a great team player on every occasion. Some of you will know that. I'm strong-minded and willing to actually drive things through which are unpopular. And sometimes that doesn't make you a great team player. But at the end of the day, everything is about being in a team and working together. Companies have to realise that. Companies have to realise that societies need tax. Now, we will hear argument today that public services are paid for with taxation, and some of you will know I don't agree with that. Actually, technically, as an economist, I'll tell you, tax doesn't pay for public services. Governments can always print and spend money without tax, but we get hyperinflation if we don't tax. So therefore we do have to tax because we pay for public services. But the point is, we cannot provide those services without tax, and technically that is absolutely true. So taxes make our economy literally work. Without taxes, we could not live in this society where things happen that we want. But that means taxes are also a tool for societal engineering. They're the biggest, and I go back to my main point, this is the joy of tax. They create a society. And we have a choice about who's going to do societal engineering, because it happens. We have a choice. Do we want government or Facebook to do it? I think you'll find most people would rather government did it. And taxes are the way that's done, not through some secret algorithm. But this means companies have to play their part in that process. They have to be seen to play their bit and pay their taxes. One, to create the level playing field between them and everybody else. Two, to pay for the privileges they get. Three, because they are team players. And that also means tax has to be fair. This corporation tax has to be fair. Fair for business, which means small businesses, by the way, should be paying less tax than large businesses, because large businesses get the greatest benefit. But we've removed that differential over the last 10 years in the UK, wholly unjustly. We should make sure that all businesses pay, simply because that means the cheats don't prosper at cost to everybody else. And it's fair to every other stakeholder and to the communities that they pay, which is why the procurement issue, which Paul has talked about, is again so important. It doesn't mean that taxes have to be burdensome. A corporation tax of 25%, even 28%, is not burdensome. No tax, as Rachel has said. No tax is paid unless you've made a profit. I used to lecture on corporation tax at one time, and I used to ask the people in the room, does anybody, when they've arrived for the morning, does anybody here not want to pay corporation tax? And thankfully, you always had somebody who went, yeah. So I said, simple, make a loss. I've solved your problem. Go home. Well, if you're going to make a profit, you should pay tax. By the way, the person never did leave. That didn't seem to be the right advice that they wanted. But if you're going to pay tax, you've got to show you have. And that's what the fair tax mark is all about. If you get the privileges, you have the obligations, it's time for business to step up to the mark. It's time for the accountancy profession to step up to the mark. It's time for the Financial Reporting Council to step up to the mark and say, we are going to ask you to account for the privileges you've got, for the tax you pay, to create an open and more honest society for the benefit of everyone. As the parent of teenagers, I know what it looks like to look at them and think, they're probably going to be all right now. As sort of one of the parents of the fair tax mark, I look at it now and think, it's probably going to be all right now. We're sort of in our teens. We're really seriously grown up. We're on our way. We've got a clear idea of what we're going to do. I'm delighted about that. I think that this is an incredibly powerful movement, which a great many people have played a great deal to create. Yeah, I'd like to remember a couple of our directors who are not here now, Misha Nehru and Emily Kenway, as well as the work that Paul is now doing. We built a massive organisation in a short time. I'm delighted, I'm honoured to be part of it. Long may it continue, because tax is part of our society.